Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Brad Poulos. Hi, Brad.
Hey, Adi.
Thank you for being on this podcast.
Sure, happy.
Good. So let's start with your bio first. So Brad, you're a lifelong entrepreneur, educator, and consultant. You started your first business at 14, and you went to launch Canada's first satellite-based internet product, and DirecPC. And you founded and led multiple companies in telecom and software. And you also exited, and you had companies, and you share your expertise as a lecturer in entrepreneurship at Toronto Metropolitan University and as a mentor and advisor to small and medium-sized businesses across North America.
That pretty much sums it up.
Okay, good. So as an entrepreneur, as an author, you also wrote several books. What do you see as the number one problem or number one issue that entrepreneurs face?
Well, I tackle that a couple of ways. So one would be mistakes that I see often made. Back when I launched DirecPC on behalf of Telesat Canada, we had never heard of the concept of lean startup. So I actually raised $2 million from the board of directors of Bell Canada to start that business. And I had actually not ever even spoken to a customer by then. We don't do it that way, right? So nowadays we actually put selling ahead of building, and we practice lean startup. Well, at least I practiced it religiously. So that means doing small experiments, finding out if the market wants your product before you actually build it. And I still see, especially in the tech, like with technically oriented founders, I still see a lot of people that think that because you can do something that you should, and that's a disaster. It's a recipe for disaster and can cause you to waste a lot of time and a lot of money. So that's probably the biggest mistake that I see made. In terms
How do you
of
overcome that mistake then? What is the right way of doing it?
The right way of doing it is go and talk to people about your idea before you ever build anything. So, first of all, you should be working from a problem outwards. If your solution or your product doesn't solve some problem, then why would anybody buy it? So you go and you create hypotheses around the problem and the people that have it. And then you go out and you talk to them. And you find out as much as you can about both the problem and the people that have it. And then you start thinking around solutions. And again, you have to go back and talk to a lot of the same people once you've got ideas for the solution, but you have to work from a problem outward.
Understood. So when you work with entrepreneurs, give an example of like a company that has done that right, that you've seen that it's being made right.
Oh my gosh, lots of them. So great example would be a company called Jersey City. So had a hypothesis that people might want to rent jerseys for, basketball, hockey, football, those sorts of things by the season. And you may or may not know, but these things are quite expensive. In Canadian dollars, for a hockey jersey with a name and numbers and all that on it, it's like $250. And so the idea was, hey, maybe people would like to rent these things by the season. And so they did it right. And so what they did is they actually went to Madison Square Garden and parked themselves outside of a game. I think it was a hockey game, but it doesn't matter. It could be basketball, it could be whatever. And asked people what they thought of the idea. And lo and behold, what they found was, yeah, maybe people would be interested in that, but it's not by the season. And if you think about it, it's actually much more logistically logical to do it by the game, and so they pivoted. So that's a great example of somebody actually practicing it and doing it right.
Excellent. What is another? So we talked about that mistake of jumping ahead without really doing the market research, a correct market research. Once you have the business, what are other some pitfalls that you have seen that you would recommend for entrepreneurs to avoid?
Well, once you've gotten to a certain size, one of the big things I see is not getting out of the way. So not building a team and then giving that team some autonomy and letting them make decisions for themselves, and really freeing you up then to work on the business as opposed to in the business. That's a pretty common one, and it's kind of human nature, I guess. But you have to fight it. You have to resist it, and learn to let go.
So how did you learn to do that in your own business? Give us some examples of what you have done in order to do that.
Sure. So first of all, I was lucky enough that I came from the corporate world. So I had been in a reasonably large organization that had some structure and was ultimately trying to, recreate that, at least recreate the good parts of it and leave behind the parts that we don't necessarily love so much. So one of the things I used to do, for example, is when I used to travel a lot in my business. And so and a lot of people want to come to you with problems because they're afraid to make mistakes. So when people would come to me with a problem, I would often say, well, like last Thursday, I was down in Dallas, and if it was last Thursday, what would you do? And they would say, well, I would do, whatever. And I'd say, okay, I think we should do that. And so what that does is a handful of things. One, it trains them to just go ahead and make the decision. Most of the time, we're not talking about decisions that either can't be reversed or are, earth-shatteringly important. So step out of your comfort zone and just go ahead and make the decision. But what it also does is it develops what I call A players, right? So the really good people, they want to have some autonomy. They want to have a lot of say about how they go about doing their job, and even some of the what, like even what they do. And so it develops those people and kind of pushes away what I would call a B player, right, or a C player. So over time, what it does is it actually helps you build a much stronger team.
Absolutely. So that's your book, Most Problems Solves Themselves.
That's actually so most problems solve themselves there's sort of two things that are behind that. Now, I should point out, the book is not about most problems solving themselves. So the book is actually 52 different articles. I just picked the most provocatively titled article in the book to slap on the front as the title of the book. So the book is about a whole bunch of different things. In fact, I even talk about systems versus goals and building SOPs, and there's articles about those sorts of things in the book as well.
So
but
tell me about building SOPs. Tell me about your philosophy about building SOPs.
Well, I firmly believe in it. So, so I look, I didn't invent any of this, but a goal without a system is just a dream, right? So, and here's one of the ways I explain it to my clients. I say, your customer will never pay for your goal. Here's an example. Let's say you have a goal to increase customer satisfaction to 98% or some number like that. Okay, great. Will your customer pay for that? No. Will they pay for the system that's behind you moving from wherever you are to 98%? Absolutely. That's why systems are important, right? And SOPs are just a system. That's all they are. They just describe a system to get something done.
It is true. It is a system. Absolutely.
Yeah. So so anyway, that's my thought around systems. And the whole goals versus systems is not something I invented. There's several other people that are much more famous than I am that tout the importance of that as well.
Yeah, it's not that you invented it, but it's the concept of utilizing it, right? And you've seen it firsthand that when you utilize it, it actually works.
Yeah, and my blog is actually called, Ideas Worth Stealing. And I firmly believe one of my little shticks I always tell my clients and my students is, look, I've never had a good idea that I didn't steal from somebody else. Right? And we should all steal unabashedly. And if you're worried about your ideas being stolen, well, ask yourself the question, would you like to have ideas that nobody wants to steal?
That's a good question, because if you do, then it's a problem, because then we're not sharing that wealth of ideas. And, we all read books, get the ideas, get the concepts. I think, the main thing here is how you apply it, how you take it and apply it to your own business. Wouldn't you say so?
Yeah, absolutely. It's in the customization of the idea, right? You steal the idea, you steal the concept, but then you have to morph it and you have to, customize it, to your own situation, for sure.
Absolutely.
But if you have ideas that nobody wants to steal, maybe they're not very good ideas.
That's very true. I mean, I guess it's a compliment if people want to steal your ideas.
What is the saying? Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, I think it is. So,
right. That's very true. Okay, so we talked about most problems solve themselves. Now you also have From Pitch to Payoff. Tell us about that book. So
sure.
What is it about?
I co-authored that book with one of my colleagues at Toronto Metropolitan University. The two of us from time to time teach the entrepreneurial finance course. And what we found is, there's lots of books around startup and there's lots of books for corporate finance. But there really was not a good book out there for the venture finance world. So this is, how do you finance a new organization? What are the things you need to know as a founder? And then what are the sources? And there's some good, financial and accounting, a little bit of accounting, mostly finance theory in there. So that's what that book's really all about.
That's great. Okay, well, give us a little bit of a teaser on that one. Like, what is one thing that our listeners, if they read that book, they will learn that they didn't know before? What ideas can be still there?
So what are the things, for example, that a venture capitalist looks for, right? What are the kind of things that are important to them, and
so
how is that
one
different?
Thing that is important. I'm curious. So, what is one thing that that is important to them?
And it's I think it's as much contrasting that from, say, what a bank would be after, than that's where I think some of the magic is. So the bank doesn't really care about your team, right? But a venture capitalist or an angel does. So the bank, they care about cash flow, they care about profit, all these mostly accounting things, but venture capitalists take risk, and so they want to mitigate that risk however they possibly can. And one of the ways by doing that is by making sure that you have a top-notch team that's going after this opportunity, whatever it might be.
Right. So that's very good for entrepreneurs to know, to invest in the team if they want to go with the venture capital route, because the venture capitalists, they do not want to lose that team.
Yeah, and it's important too to understand it has to be a team. So you can start a business on your own, but it's very difficult to finance it. Professional investors do not invest in single entrepreneurs for a reason that should be obvious, but in case it's not, one entrepreneur can go away. A team maybe not. So
yeah, there is continuity, there is risk mitigation, there is also ability to expand and scale, because one entrepreneur is not going to be, no matter how bright the idea, you're not going to be, there will be a capacity issue there. So
sure,
if you want to scale, if you want to grow, you definitely need to have a team. Absolutely.
And skill set as well. So right. No one individual has all of the necessary skills to get a venture, from zero to fast. You have to be good at. We actually have a model that we teach in the entrepreneurship department at Toronto Metropolitan University. It was actually coined by one of my colleagues, Sean Wise, and it's called the talent triangle. And basically, it outlines the three kind of main things you need to have in a startup team. And we must underscore, it has to be a team. You cannot, as a founder, claim that you own all three corners of the talent triangle.
So what are the corners of the triangle?
Yeah. Okay. So the first one is general business wisdom. So business acumen, right? Not tied to any particular domain. Just does this person, are they wise? And so that usually is going to be one of the older people on the team, because wisdom often comes with age. Then the second area is domain knowledge. So that's what I call knowledge of the dirty little secrets of any industry. Makes it much easier to break in. The example I often give my students, because so many of them want to do products that would ultimately end up on a grocery store shelf, is that, boy, oh boy, it really helps if you have somebody on your team who has the knowledge of how does that actually happen, because it's nowhere near as easy as you might think. And then the last corner is operational experience. So that's the person that knows how to do whatever it is you're going to do. So if you're building a new electronic truck, e-truck, it's somebody who knows how to build cars.
Absolutely. And that just goes hand in hand with what we specialize in, which is extracting that knowledge, documenting it, and making sure it's being implemented, because that triangle is spot on. You have the general business knowledge, you have your own special best practices, whatever you're doing, and then the specialized operational part. And all of it, you have to have it in a playbook, so it's documented, but it's also a living, breathing document, because it changes, and it can change so fast, especially the operations, or you introduce new technologies, AI, etc. So it all needs to be maintained. So I agree with that triangle, absolutely. Well, Brad, if our listeners would like to read your books, they should go to Amazon and search your name and search for the books, right?
Yes. Yeah, there's also something else I wouldn't mind mentioning too, and that's that I just actually launched a new product called the Operator's Cadence. And it actually gives owners and operators like a complete execution system for running their business, from vision and mission down to 10-year, 3-year, annual, quarterly, weekly, and daily planning. And you can get that at theconfidentoperator.com.
Excellent. All right. Well, Brad, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and being a guest on this podcast.
It was fun. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.